5 months ago, 2 ransom notes landed at a Tucson TV station. They talked about Bitcoin. They talked about deadlines. And then one of them said something no family should ever have to read, that an 84-year-old grandmother had died shortly after she was taken, and that she was buried with nature. For weeks, investigators treated those words as the closest thing they had to the truth. A shift from a kidnapping to a possible homicide. A reason for search teams to start looking in very different places. And then, this week, the FBI told Reuters something that undoes almost everything we thought we knew. None of it, they now say, was real. Not the crypto demands, not the death note, not even a third message that surfaced just days ago claiming to identify the kidnappers by name. The FBI's own words, none of the ransom notes are believed to be genuine. So, if the notes were fake, all 3 of them, where does that leave the actual case? Because somewhere in Tucson, Arizona, a real 84-year-old woman is still missing. And after 5 months, investigators are no closer to saying who took her or why. Let's rewind to where this began, because the last few days only make sense against that backdrop. Nancy Guthrie, mother of Today Show co-anchor Savannah Guthrie, was last seen alive on the night of January 31st, 2026. Her son-in-law dropped her off at her home in the Catalina foothills, just outside Tucson, at around 9:50 p.m. She lived alone. She had a pacemaker, a heart condition, and mobility problems that meant she needed daily medication just to function. The next morning, she didn't show up for a live-streamed church service she never missed. Family went to check on her. Her phone was still inside the house. So were her other essentials. She was gone. Investigators quickly found drops of Nancy's blood near the front door. Her home doorbell camera had been deliberately disconnected at 1:47 a.m., and just 25 minutes later, the system's software flagged a person on camera, footage that the system's own recording cycle overwrote before anyone could save it. Days later, the FBI released images of a masked suspect. Average build, 5'9" or 5'10", seen on Nancy's own doorbell camera the night she vanished, wearing gloves and carrying a black 25-liter backpack. A specific model sold exclusively at Walmart, which investigators used to try to trace his movements through store surveillance. That suspect has never been named. He has never been arrested. 5 months later, he is still, as far as the public record shows, a ghost. While the real search dragged on, one man made himself very easy to catch. 3 days after Nancy disappeared, Derek Colella, a 42-year-old from Hawthorne, California, with zero known connection to the Guthrie family, watched the family's public plea and decided to try his luck. He tracked down contact information for Nancy's relatives and sent text messages asking whether they'd sent the Bitcoin he claimed to be owed. He wasn't careful about it. Investigators traced the messages back to him fast, and he was arrested and charged with transmitting a ransom demand across state lines and using a telecommunications device to harass. Federal charges, both of them. Colella pleaded not guilty back in February. His case dragged through the system for months. A trial date was set, then pushed. And now, after nearly half a year, it's reaching its conclusion. A change of plea hearing is scheduled for tomorrow, July 2nd, 2026, in federal court in Tucson. If he changes his plea to guilty, as these hearings typically signal, it closes the book on the one part of this story that was never really a mystery. Because here's the thing worth sitting with, Colella was never accused of taking Nancy. From day one, investigators said he had no connection to her disappearance. He was a man capitalizing on someone else's tragedy. Cruel, but not the case. The real case was always the other messages, the ones sent to the media. Those other messages are where this story actually lives. In the days after Nancy vanished, a Tucson television station, along with other outlets, including TMZ, received communications claiming to be from whoever took her. The first demanded millions of dollars in cryptocurrency, with 2 separate payment deadlines, February 5th, then February 9th. Both deadlines passed. No payment, no release. Then came the second note on February 6th. Its contents were kept out of the public eye for months, at law enforcement's request. A decision meant to protect any possible line of communication with whoever sent it. When the details finally leaked out in June, they were grim. The note reportedly said Nancy had died unintentionally shortly after being taken, and that she'd been buried with nature. For weeks, this was treated as close to gospel. Investigators noted that the first two notes appeared to share an origin. Similar language, and according to later reporting, technical routing that suggested a level of digital discipline you don't see from random opportunists. Sources briefed on the case told multiple outlets in late June that investigators now believe these two notes likely came from the actual abductor. That single conclusion reframed the entire case, from an active kidnapping for ransom into what looked, increasingly, like a homicide investigation. Then, just last week, a third message arrived, this one sent to TMZ, from someone claiming to know the identity of Nancy's kidnappers and claiming to possess video evidence, including of the main guy involved and of Nancy herself on the day she died. 3 notes, 1 story, a trail that seemed, finally, to be leading somewhere. And then, this week, the floor dropped out from under all of it. An FBI official told Reuters, on condition of anonymity, because the investigation remains active, that none of the 3 ransom notes are believed to be genuine. Not the crypto demand, not the buried with nature note, not the third message to TMZ. A second law enforcement source, independently, confirmed the same conclusion. Investigators had determined the first 2 notes shared a common sender, but the FBI now says that sender wasn't connected to Nancy's actual disappearance at all. As for the third note, the FBI hasn't revealed how they ruled it out. They've simply said it too is fake. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos had already voiced skepticism about that third message publicly on a local Arizona radio station, saying that the attention this case draws inevitably brings people who send in false information, attention seekers, he suggested, who end up tying up investigators and disrupting entire neighborhoods in the process. Sit with what that actually means. For months, the working theory, reported widely, discussed on national television, absorbed by millions of people following this case, was that Nancy Guthrie had likely died shortly after being taken. That theory rested substantially on a note the FBI is now calling fake. That doesn't mean Nancy is alive. It doesn't mean she isn't. What it means is that the single piece of evidence that shifted this from a kidnapping to a presumed death was never solid ground to begin with. As one report put it, this disclosure seemed to raise doubts about investigators' fundamental premise, that Nancy was taken for ransom in the first place. 5 months in, and the case may be back to a question this basic: what actually happened to her and why? So if the notes are out, what does the investigation actually have? There's still the DNA. Investigators recovered mixed DNA evidence from Nancy's home, and as of this year it's still undergoing forensic analysis. A process that, 5 months on, has yielded no public announcement of a match or a suspect. There's still the masked figure captured on the doorbell camera the night she disappeared. A physical description that's never led to a named person. There's Nancy's pacemaker, which, oddly, has become one of the more active threads in the investigation. Because her device lost its connection to her phone the moment she vanished, the FBI has experimented with signal sniffer technology designed to pick up the Bluetooth signal and unique hardware address of her specific pacemaker from the air. It's not a tracking chip, doctors have cautioned, but investigators hoped it might help narrow down a location if she's anywhere nearby. And there's tension behind the scenes. A volunteer search and rescue group, the United Cajun Navy, has said publicly that it repeatedly offered drones, K-9 teams, and experienced volunteers early in the search. Offers the organization says were turned down by local authorities, despite a strong belief among some searchers that Nancy could be somewhere near the U.S.-Mexico border. A region investigators did brief both American and Mexican officials about early on. Meanwhile, the reward has grown in pieces, starting at $50,000 from the FBI, later increased with the Guthrie family independently pledging up to $1 million of their own for anything that leads to Nancy's safe recovery. None of it, so far, has produced a name. Here's where this leaves us, 5 months and one bombshell later. A man who impersonated a kidnapper for attention is about to face the consequences of that choice in a Tucson courtroom tomorrow. Meanwhile, the actual disappearance of Nancy Guthrie remains exactly what it was on February 1st, unsolved. The notes that once seemed like the clearest window into what happened to her have all just been thrown out by the very agency investigating the case. What's left is a masked figure on a doorbell camera, blood on a porch, DNA still being processed in a lab, and a family that has spent 5 months not knowing whether they're searching for their mother or for closure. If you know anything at all, no matter how small it seems, the FBI's tip line is still open, 1-800-CALL-FBI. The combined reward for information now stands well into 6 figures, with the Guthrie family's own pledge on top of that. Because somewhere, someone knows what really happened the night Nancy Guthrie disappeared. And after 5 months of false leads, the truth is still out there, waiting for someone to come forward.